All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm doing this set on Thursday afternoon for the English 1301 Tuesday Thursday section 12110 uh, Tuesday Thursday crowd, um, as well as the section 12105 my Friday Saturday class as well. Um, and we're kind of continuing some of the things we talked about in that last video. And what we'll do today is again kind of talk about some of the things that kind of come early in 1301, the kind of initial things that we talk about. A lot of things that as you probably heard before, that probably will be that you'll probably expect, things that will probably serve as review for a lot of you guys, but things that are really kind of crucial. So we'll cover some of those today, and most of the things I talk about will come from chapter 1, the Bedford Reader 14th edition, chapter 1. If you don't have that, I wouldn't stress out about that at the moment. I understand there are some issues with obtaining the books, obtaining the ebooks and whatnot, but go ahead and just kind of bear with us as we go through the first parts of the book, and I will post kind of notes from today's spiel on the canvas, so that you can kind of follow along. But again, most of this stuff, you will be kind of quizzed on it, or at least a portion of it in the future. But you can survive even if you don't have the book at this time. There's a lot of things I say, like I said before, will kind of serve as review. These should be things that are somewhat familiar for you. Um, so we'll go through chapter 1 a little bit, a portion of chapter 1. We'll kind of do the first portion of it today, and then next week we'll probably finish it out, and you'll see we'll be in chapter 1 for a bit with the our next writing assignment, our first kind of reading exercise that we'll be doing. So chapter 1 will be somewhere where we are for at least a portion of next week as well. So we'll do that, and I want to kind of mention the review again, just to maybe clarify a few things, or at least kind of go through the example that we have. I posted a sample review on there. I'll kind of go through that today, point out how that example is similar to what you're doing. I'm thinking some of the things you do will kind of be different, but it's I think a good example, even though it's very short, that you can go by. It has those elements that we talked about in the last video. So we'll go through that, and if you are writing that review at this time, you have any questions about that, definitely hit me up on the Canvas or the class email, HECS email. I'll be happy to address whatever questions you have about the review essay. Okay. Chapter 1. We'll talk about that real quick. And if you are following along, it starts on page 9 of your textbook. And we'll kind of go through some of those early passages here to start off. The chapter is titled Critical Reading, Learning from Other Writers. Love that title. It's kind of apt. Critical reading is obvious, but this idea of learning from other writers is something that'll be big in this course. You're going to see that as a part of what we do a lot, and something that I encourage. Learning from other writers is primary reason you're going to do so much reading in this class. You kind of become better as a writer by just being exposed to good writing, just by experiencing what other people have put on paper. The selections in the book are extraordinary in that regard. You got examples from all different genres, writers from all different walks of life, all different kind of ideologies and politics and things like that, and they kind of give you a different perspective on different topics. The styles are all across the board, and by reading those writers, and you may feel somewhat overwhelmed by the amount of reading, I guess, in this class sometimes. Reading those writers is one of the things that kind of help you become better. Probably far more than you'll get from lectures or whatever. Reading and writing are interconnected, and kind of being exposed to those writers really helps you as a writer. And so we'll hit those opening paragraphs of page 9, the first chapter. And like I just said, reading and writing are interconnected. That's the first sentence there. Deepen your mastery of one, and you deepen your mastery of the other. Much more eloquently than I just said it, but very true. As you get more experience as a writer, you kind of understand the truth of that statement. The experience of carefully reading an excellent writer, noticing not only what that writer has to say, but also the quality of its saying, rubs off, if you're patient and perceptive, on your writing. For any writer, then, reading is indispensable. It turns up fresh ideas, it stocks the mind with information, understanding, and examples. It instills critical awareness of one's own surroundings. So, really good stuff there. And it kind of says, it kind of reiterates what I was saying a second ago. Reading and writing have a relationship, and when you get really well versed in one, you become better at the other. And as a writer, for you to write well, that reading part, as hard and tedious as it can be sometimes, that reading part, as the book says, is indispensable. You can't do without it. It's such a great help. Then that second paragraph, I won't read that paragraph word for word, but it talks about how whatever career you enter, and I think it applies in the workforce, but also it applies in just the disciplines, all the different disciplines in college, all the classes that you're going to take. Reading is going to be an integral part of it, and it kind of goes into that a little bit, and it gives some examples from political science, from science, and it goes into how reading is going to be a part of that. And that's kind of why, as a core requirement, you have a class like 1301, 1302 before you move on, because it kind of establishes a foundation of kind of really becoming a good critical reader. And then in that second paragraph, towards the bottom of page 9, they give us a definition of critical reading. And this is important. You may be asked to talk about this again, or asked to define this on a quiz or whatever. You will find this in the notes for today. But they give a definition of critical reading, and I think it's a very good one. Again, bottom of page 9, it says critical reading involves looking beneath the surface of a text, seeking to understand the creator's intentions, the strategies for achieving them, and their effects. It's a very well put definition of critical reading. And then on page 10, at the very top there, they kind of give a little bit further of a definition. They talk about seeing beneath the surface of a work there at the very top, mastering its complexities, gauging its intentions and techniques, judging its value. Those are very good ways to describe critical reading. And the key there, looking beneath the surface, analyzing that work, looking at what went into the writer's intentions when they wrote it. What is how do you judge the quality of it? How do you evaluate it? Is it a strong argument? Is it a weak argument? Is it biased, or is it objective? These kind of things. Those things are what critical reading is all about. So it kind of goes beyond just going through going through the passage and knowing what's being said, but kind of looking a little bit deeper, looking beneath the surface. So a good definition there, and the type of reading that we're going to kind of push you to do in 1301, kind of reading that hopefully you'll continue to do as you go forward in college, is critical reading that goes a little bit deeper, where you're thinking about some of all of those other elements involved in the text. And our reading that we do in 1301 will involve critical reading, and you'll see that a lot of our discussion questions and quiz questions and things like that are kind of designed to get you thinking critically about these texts. And I think ultimately that may be one of the things that you come away from 1301 with more than anything else. You'll kind of be more aware of what strategies go into a piece, how a writer's background kind of affects what they're doing, what they're writing about, those kind of things. You'll kind of, hopefully as an instinct, you'll kind of, whenever you read anything, you'll kind of be aware of some of the other factors that go beyond the page. All right, so that page 10, we'll get into that that portion of it. The rest of chapter 1 kind of talks about different aspects of reading critically, and page 10 has a section called Reading Actively, and it gives you some aspects of being an active reader, a part of reading critically, something that I would encourage you to do. I don't want you to just take in the material passively. I want you to engage with it, and it's kind of one of the ways that you can really kind of get into it, be able to speak on it in a paper, and also it's ways to kind of help you retain the information. And at the top of page 10, they kind of lead into this section. They say, how do we read critically? How do we get beneath the surface and gauge a writer's intentions and judge its value? And then they get into some of the practical things that you can do. That first kind of activity that goes into active reading that they talk about, something called previewing. And this is something that I do want you to really kind of dig into. You may be asked about this. I will mention these aspects in the kind of notes for today, but this is something I do want you to apply practically if you aren't doing this already, because I think this is really crucial, and we'll probably apply this section to some of the readings that we look at. But they say there in that section, critical reading starts before you read the first word of a piece of writing, and I like that. That's really true, and it's something that hopefully if this isn't review for, hope that's something that sticks with you as you go into the readings in this class. Critical reading starts even before you read a piece of writing, because remember, when you're reading critically, you're concerned with more than just the words that are on the page. And they go on and say, you take stock of what's before you, locating clues to the work's content and the writer's biases. Whenever you approach a written work, make a point of assessing these features beforehand. And so this is really cool. It's kind of gives you a kind of a strategy of where you can kind of be active in kind of taking in some of the things that affect the message that the writer is giving you in the actual text. And they mention 5 elements that you can kind of look at before you start reading a piece. And these things kind of already get you in the mode of critical reading. First, which may be kind of obvious, is the title of a work. And I won't read all the explanation with all of these aspects of previewing, but the title is important. I think that's almost self-explanatory. A lot of times the title of a work can clue you into the most important part of the work, which is its main idea. Our first reading that we do is going to be a piece called Disability. It's actually on the next page of your text there on page 12. The title of it is Disability. Guess what the author is going to talk about? She's going to talk about disabled people in America or in the world. It's more to it than that. But the title kind of clues you in on where the piece is going. And this is a theme that you're going to see over and over again in this class, where the title sometimes really gives a lot of clues as far as where the author is going. That's something to pay attention to. And it kind of, I would say, pay attention to titles just as a reader and a writer, as it's an aspect of critical thinking, critical reading, but also think about the thought and the intent behind some of these titles. I think it's something you can apply to your own writing. Another aspect of previewing is the author, the person who wrote the piece, and specifically that means who they are as a person, where they come from, when they were born, their politics, their sexual orientation, their education. A lot of things that are part of their background affect the message. Religion, their faith, it can be a big part of what they talk about in their text as well. And they mention whatever you know or can learn about the writer, things like their upbringing, special training, previous publications, outlook, ideology. Those things can often help you predict something about a work. And I won't spoil too much, but we're going to read some things from authors that have a very specific viewpoint, and it's almost undeniable how it affects their message. And talking about that author, getting on the Google and kind of searching that person out, learning a little bit about that person can really help you kind of see where they're coming from as a writer, and also it can help in some of the things that you write about these texts, because it's the author a lot of times is that work is a part of them. It's their background, who they are as a person, is kind of inextricably kind of tied to that text. So learning about the author is really important. And in this book, and most of our readings will come from here, they always give you a little snippet about the author. Maybe just be a little blurb at the top of the piece, but be sure to check it out. Don't always kind of gloss over that, because learning a little bit about some of the things they list here, as well as some of the other things that they've written, they usually give references to other works that they've written that you can also look up. Learning about those things can really be helpful. All right. Genre is another one. Genre means the type of work, the category the work falls in. I think our genres will kind of be pretty uniform in this class. You won't see anything too radically different from each other. We will read quite a few narrative essays in here, so that'll be the only real genre shift that takes place in this class. But genre is important because every genre has rules that those that kind of apply to the style and everything. So one piece that's just written, a fiction piece that we'll read, or kind of a narrative style piece that we'll look at, has a different style, a different rules of how to organize it, different language that the author can use, as opposed to a piece that's written in a news publication. So those genre plays a role, and I think for you guys, you'll be perfectly aware of what genre we're working with in the readings that we do. But when you're doing your own research, when you're pulling from other sources, genre may be a factor in which ones you use, and because the genre kind of dictates the how opinionated a writer can be, or how how much they can editorialize and things like that. So genre can be important, and it's something to kind of think about when you before you start that critical reading, or before you actually start reading the actual text. Last two on the list: one, where a work was published, meaning what type of publication you find it in. That can matter. That also, just like genre, it kind of plays a role with what the writer's talking about, the style, the even sometimes the credibility of the author, the research that author might have done. Um, the And this also applies with your research when you're pulling from other sources. Look at the source, look at where that piece of writing comes from. Hopefully this is something that you've heard before. But a piece about a certain subject from an academic journal may have more credibility from an academic standpoint than a piece that's, something that you found on Wikipedia or something that you found in a kind of independent blog website kind of thing. So genre or where the work was published can be extremely important. And they mentioned in the last part of that section, top of page 11, good writers, as you will see, develop an awareness of their audience and shape their messages to appeal to particular readers' interests and needs. And where, types of publications, where you find these works is important because they're kind of thinking about their audience. And sometimes for a certain audience, there are certain, kind of liberties that you can take with your support for your points, with your evidence that you use, and with your language that you can use. So kind of think about that and be mindful to point that out for your readers when you do quote from different sources. We're going to read an essay that's not in your book, comes from a publication called Christianity Today. And it's obviously Christianity Today has a certain slant to it. And the writer, he has this, he's kind of a Christian person writing to a Christian audience. And so his article reflects that. And so if you write about that subject, that is a factor that you kind of have to take into consideration. And that's why one of the aspects of why the place of publication or the source of publication, where the work was published, can be really, really important. Last one is when the work was published. And this is a factor, not always a make or break factor with something, but when a work was published, what year did the work come out? And sometimes an article on a certain subject that was written in 1999 might not be as relevant in 2020. And that kind of rule of thumb is something that you want to think about. It's not always a deal breaker. You're going to read some articles that kind of cover a long span of time in this class. Matter of fact, we're going to check out disability here pretty soon. That's written 1987. And the things in that article are very much relevant today. At least indirectly, maybe some of the things that have kind of changed, but what that author is talking about in 1987 in a lot of ways kind of still applies. I don't even want to think of how many years later, 33 years later. The timing or the when the work was published, really, really important in certain disciplines. If you're writing about, it's definitely about science and how the advances that we can see in technology and science. If you're talking about a subject like that, you definitely want to get the most recent material to choose from. And so that can play a role. But all of those factors, title, author, genre, where a work was published, when a work was published, are important parts of reading. And those are things that kind of come into play even before you start reading. So important to kind of take stock of those things. Maybe not all five, but take a stock of some of those factors before you start reading. It can be really useful and it kind of gets you prepared for what that author is going to say, and to kind of have a read on that person and that work, and kind of have that kind of head start in your analysis. They talk about annotating or taking notes on page 11. Won't go through all of that, but they talk about things like underlining essential ideas, marking key passages, writing questions in the margins, making kind of associations with other things that you have heard, other works that you've read, kind of making connections there. and just venting your feelings. I'm just talking about if a piece makes you angry or mad, or if you violently disagree with it. Those kind of things can be something that you can jot down, or even take mental note, if not physical notes, for purposes of kind of writing about it later. But all those things kind of help to not only to help make your book messy, but also to help you retain the stuff. And I don't know, a lot of you don't have physical books that you can write on, and some of you don't want to write on those physical books, and I get that. But this idea of taking notes, this idea of writing things as you read, as simple as it sounds, it really can be helpful. And I would say, definitely in this class, to make a part of your reading experience to take notes. Kind of underline things that stick out to you, underline things that you don't quite understand initially. That helps to keep that information inside, help the information kind of stay with you. The disability piece that I keep mentioning is there on page 12 through 14 through 15 actually, and you'll see that what I think is kind of cool, they have a copy of that article that's all marked up. They have the underlined passages, they have notes in the margins, they have words that are circled, things like that. And I won't spoil the specifics of what's going on there, but they give you a lot of clues as to what's going on in the article. The notes, the annotations kind of break down what Nancy Mears is talking about, and it's pretty cool. And it's for your assignment, is going to be really helpful, because you'll things like the main idea will be already kind of handed to you, but also as a reader yourself, as a critical reader yourself, and if you're reading this from our textbook, take the time to look at what things are underlined and why, and kind of maybe apply it to your own kind of reading habits. It can definitely be helpful. So they have a section about annotation, which is kind of cool. Last thing we'll talk about, or second to last thing we'll talk about from chapter 1, they talk about thinking critically on page 16. And I won't go into too much detail here, but I do want to point it out because it will be something that you might be asked again. So 16 and 17 talk about thinking critically, and they talk about 4 kind of aspects of critical thinking: analysis, inference, synthesis, and evaluation. And I won't belabor the definitions of those, but analysis is examining elements of the work, things like thesis, the language, the purpose, the audience, the genre, everything that's kind of contributing to the whole. You're breaking it down, seeing how those parts will work. Inference is interpreting those hidden meanings, or those underlying meanings in those texts. Synthesize is when you kind of form an idea of your own out of the other elements involved in the work, kind of seeing how those elements function together, and how they kind of come together to produce a whole. And we'll talk about synthesis in detail when we get around to our one of the future papers. And evaluation, they talk about that there on page 18. And evaluation is, I think that's self-explanatory. This idea of judging the quality, judging the merit, significance of a work, the value of a work. And that's something that I want you to talk about a lot. I want you to talk about why something is good or bad, and go into detail as to why you think the way you do. Last thing we'll look at from chapter 1, and this also will be listed in your notes, at least briefly. They have a section called Analyzing Written Works, analysis being a part of critical thinking, as they just kind of mentioned. And analysis will be really crucial throughout 1301. And pretty much everything that you write, everything that you do in this class will involve some kind of analysis, some kind of breakdown of what the writers are saying. You'll have discussion questions that ask you to break down the pieces. You'll have obviously essays to write, where the primary thing you'll be doing is analysis. And they give a nice little breakdown of what to look for, what to do when you're analyzing written works. Starts on page 18 and it goes to page 22. I'll mention three aspects of that, and I'll try to do it quickly here. But they focus on. Well, I'll focus on the three main things that they talk about. They mention meaning, and they mean, kind of. I'll kind of read what they mean when they say meaning. Say by meaning, we're getting at what the words say literally, of course, but also what they imply, and more generally, what the author's aims are. When reading an essay, look especially for the thesis and try to determine the author's purpose for writing. So meaning involves that thesis statement, which we'll further define, but I'm thinking most of us know what I mean when I say thesis. I mean the main idea of a piece, stated or unstated. Usually you'll see a statement that kind of spells out your thesis statement, but there may be a few that you run by that don't have an official thesis statement, and you still kind of have to figure out that main idea. But that's what meaning involves, and the purpose, why the writer wrote this, what is he or she trying to accomplish. The next thing they talk about is writing strategy, which is again kind of self-explanatory, and things. This is probably the broadest category, and this is something that I'll really be looking for you to dig into in analysis. But this involves all the things that go into that author's message. Who's their audience? Who are they talking to? How are they trying to reach him? How they support that thesis statement, those supporting details. What are they? How effective are they? Do you agree with them? Do you find fault with them, kind of thing? And then evidence that the author uses. What are they doing to back up their claim in this text? And does it really hold up? And you'll see a wide range of strategies that these authors use to kind of support their point. Some will be impressive and you'll be on board with it. Some of them will fall flat, and that's okay. And you'll be I'll want you to kind of identify those strategies and evaluate those strategies. So writing strategy is another way that analysis of text in this book or in our class will kind of be broken down. The last one is language, another self-explanatory term. Language is the words in the piece. What words do they use? How are they using them? What are the connotations and implications of these words? And they mention a thing that is created by language, which is tone. Is the tone of the piece angry? The tone means the mood or the feeling that you get from the writer, the attitude of the piece. Sometimes that tone will be funny or angry, or there'll be kind of a sense of urgency in the writing. There'll be some sarcasm, things like that. Language is what creates that mood, what creates that feeling. And you'll see, I think right off the bat with this ability, that some of these writers are pretty gifted in the area of using language to create tone. Then how effective are the words in general? How good is this person with language, and is it really kind of moving you when you read it? And then that last thing that they mention about language, figures of speech, things like metaphor, simile, hyperbole, personification. How is the writer using language to create those things, and how effective are those things? You'll see varying levels of effectiveness in that area, but language is something that you'll be asked to look at in analysis of these texts. And I think some of the pieces in the book and some of the things I'll bring from outside of the book have some really good examples of a writer just having a gift for that particular area. And you'll notice that gift even if you disagree with their points. Okay, so that's I guess one last thing about the analyzing written work section. They break down generally analysis of text here in chapter 1, page 18 to 22, but also the discussion questions that you see in the book And these discussion questions will kind of make for a lot of your assignments in the class sometimes. So those questions that they give you in the book are also kind of broken down into those three categories. And I think that's a really good way to kind of get you, kind of focus you on it in your analysis of a text. Kind of give you some practical things to kind of look for instead of making analysis this mysterious kind of general thing. And so I think that's a really cool thing about the Bedford Reader. All right, so that's kind of what we'll cover in chapter 1 today. We probably won't do too much about the visual images part of chapter 1 that kind of comes after page 22. But we will kind of circle back to Nancy Mears' disability, like I mentioned, and on the next video or our meeting that we'll have, we'll kind of go through what that entails and kind of talk about how chapter 1 applies to disability. So you might, I guess, in the meantime kind of thing, you might want to look at, chapter 1, of course, but definitely kind of look at as kind of an addition. Don't just gloss over Nancy Mears' disability. Kind of have a sense of what that's about. Okay, so that's chapter 1. And like I said, review for a lot of you, but crucial chapter going forward. I'm thinking everything in chapter 1 that we cover will follow us throughout the semester. Something that is super practical for our purposes. Last thing I'll cover, and I already got this video longer than I wanted it to be, but I wanted to give a kind of at least a mention to that sample review that I gave you. At this point, we should be working on our review assignment, and we still got plenty of time to do it, but definitely at this point you should at least have a topic picked, and if you do need help with that, please hit me up on one of the emails. But I wanted to kind of mention just a little bit about that sample review that I posted, and I'll kind of point to some details and kind of talk about why I put it there. But I mentioned that you had a sample review. I think we have Avengers Endgame as a review on there somewhere, I think in the Start Here page or on the module 1. So that's one example you can look at. Then I gave kind of a more lesser known movie that was there, that was out there, that I think would help as well. You have a review for Wind River. This is Taylor Sheridan's movie from, I want to say 2017. I may be wrong about that year, but as a recommendation, I do recommend this movie. It's on Netflix for the longest time. It might not be there anymore, but if you have not seen Wind River, it is very good. It's not for children. It just got some elements in there that are pretty heavy, but excellent movie. And you got a kind of a short review from the Detroit News. I didn't give you the publication information here, but it comes from the Detroit News, and this is one of the many movie reviews that you can find out there. And I'll point out some of the things that they have here. The introduction. Wind River opens with the stark image of a woman running barefoot across the frozen emptiness in wide open Wyoming. The particulars of who she is, where she is, and why she's running are the subject of this gritty, dense, and superbly realized crime procedural that ranks among the year's best films. Whatever year that was. I think 2017. We'll see. So that it opens up there, got an introduction. You also have, kind of fairly decent organization in the rest of the body. And you can kind of see, even though it's a newspaper article and they have have a different genre, as the book kind of points out. So their rules for structuring this are a little different than yours. They still have a fairly clear organization. That second paragraph then kind of goes into the some of the things he thinks about the movie. He says, Taylor Sheridan, who wrote Sicario and Hell to High Water, both on the short list of the decade's finest works, continues his hot streak here and shows his knack for richly written characters, a detailed sense of environment, and sharp dialogue. He quotes the movie there, "Out here you survive or you surrender." The third paragraph goes into some of the details about how he feels about the work. Jeremy Renner, this is the guy who plays Hawkeye in the Avengers movies. In his strongest performance since his Oscar-nominated turn in The Town is Corey Lambert, blah, 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 blah. Then he talks about Elizabeth Olsen, coincidentally another Avenger person. He mentions how they team up together in the movie. So in that paragraph, he gives you Jeremy Renner's character, Olsen's character, and how they fit into the plot, and gives you a sense of what the movie's about. And then without reading word for word that last paragraph, he has some of his more opinionated statements about the movie. He talks about what Taylor Sheridan does well. He talks about the writing from Sheridan, and he talks about the kind of the feel of how the movie will, as he quotes there, or as he says there, how the movie is going to, quote, blow you away. And in this review, very short, it was something that I think made for an easy read. I wanted you to kind of see what goes into a review. You got a description of that plot of the movie there, very brief. Brief, shorter than I would want yours to be. Obviously, I want your paper in overall to kind of be longer than this. But those elements are there. You can see how the writer in this short space gives you enough of the plot to kind of get you interested, kind of give you some of the things in the plot that are important without giving too much away, right? You have that, you kind of have a picture of how the movie opens, and the opening of this movie is really, really interesting, just to put it mildly. But you really, as having seen the movie, really have no idea what's coming when you watch the movie. So that's a good way to kind of select what the audience needs to know in a summary without giving too much. And I think it's a good example because clearly this review was required to be this short, and he kind of needed to fit just so much in there to kind of fill the space. And then also he mentions some of the strengths of the movie, and he gets specific. He mentions mostly Taylor Sheridan and his writing and everything. He without overtly putting it out there, he kind of talks about the cinematography in a lot of ways in that opening paragraph, or just the way the movie looks, which is pretty interesting. It takes place in Wyoming, in this remote area, and it's a very unique setting, and the people who shot this movie really kind of take advantage of that setting. And so he gets into detail about the things that, in this case, makes the movie a good movie. In his opinion, it's a positive review. So you can see both of those elements, the two things that you really need in this paper, that kind of summary of the piece, specific critiques of the movie, specific opinions or responses to the movie. Those two elements are there, and you can see kind of a different, or you can see a writer kind of taking liberties with the organization. He puts the details and organizes those details in a way that worked for this particular article, and you have that freedom as well in your review. So hopefully this helps, and hopefully this also gives you, if you're struggling to find a topic and you're into movies, this is I think it'd be a worthwhile thing to talk about, and a worthwhile thing to see, because I don't think enough people saw this movie. But that's Wind River, and hopefully that kind of gives you another practical look at what your review could look like. So we'll kind of end things for today with that, and just for next time, if you haven't already, and if you have the book, check out chapter 1, and also be sure to read Disability. You'll have access to that regardless if you have the book or not. That'll be a post either on the Learning Web or Canvas. But definitely you'll get a heads up as to where to find that piece. And I guess in the meantime, get your topic for your review if you don't have that already, and begin kind of drafting that. And I'm open to feedback and guidance all the way up until the due date for that. All right, so that's it for today. God bless, and hopefully we'll catch up with each other, either in a Zoom meeting or some other form for next week. Thank you.